Welcome to HFY Sci-Fi Love and War Story, where we journey through the vastness of space, exploring the mysteries of extraterrestrial encounters, intergalactic war, and the enduring spirit of humanity. In today's episode, we dive deep into a galaxy on the brink of transformation, where humanity, newly awakened to its power, faces off against an ancient galactic council that has long ruled with manipulation and control. After the execution of Earth's first ambassador, Elina Ray, humanity rises in defiance, uncovering long-buried truths that shake the very foundation of the Galactic Council. As the war unfolds, alliances shift, and a new era begins, one where Earth's legacy is no longer defined by its vulnerability but by its strength and determination to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Join us on this epic journey of rebellion, justice, and the quest for peace in a universe teeming with life, secrets, and the endless possibility of what humanity could become. Ambassador Elina Ray stood at the threshold of the airlock, her breath caught in her chest. The faint hiss of the hatch opening reverberated through her body, echoing like the whisper of the cosmos itself. She stepped forward, the cold gleam of the Galactic Council's orbital station stretching out before her, an immense, silvery structure suspended in the void of space. It was like a delicate flower floating among the stars, its petals comprised of docking bays that held ships from 100 different worlds, each unique in design and purpose. The station's surface shimmered with the glow of distant suns, a symbol of ancient unity and power. The airlock doors hissed closed behind her, and the gentle hum of artificial gravity settled underfoot as Elina, along with her 4 junior diplomats, moved into the heart of the station. The atmosphere felt heavy with anticipation. The mission was a momentous one, the first official step for humanity into the galactic community. They had arrived, ready to seek cooperation, knowledge, and peace. Yet, despite the ambitious purpose of her mission, Elina couldn't shake the sensation that they were trespassing in a room of immense power. She turned to her team, offering a quiet smile that barely masked the anxiety beneath. "Chin up, we belong here," she whispered to them, her voice steady but laced with uncertainty. The others nodded, their expressions a mix of nervous determination. They knew what was at stake, but the overwhelming scale of the task ahead was undeniable. As they walked down the grand entrance hall, the sense of insignificance intensified. The space around them was massive, an endless stretch of polished floors beneath high ceilings that seemed to vanish into infinity. Towering columns made of unknown materials reached up to the vaulted ceiling, and the walls shimmered with strange, iridescent lights that pulsed as though alive. The very air felt different, charged, like it carried the weight of countless years, of countless civilizations, all converging in this one place. Then, Elina felt it, the weight of the gazes upon her. From the shadows in the vast hall, 12 elder species of the Galactic Council regarded her and her team with intense scrutiny. Some of the beings were so tall they seemed to scrape the heavens. One species, a towering creature that resembled a giraffe, stood at least 3 meters high. Its long, spindly legs ended in delicate hooves, and its head, adorned with a cluster of glowing eyes, swiveled to track their every movement. The creature's skin shimmered with patterns like moving liquid, catching the light as it studied them, its expression unreadable. Another species, its body composed entirely of tentacles, shifted slightly as if to make room. Its eyes, large and luminous, blinked in slow succession, one after the other, taking in every detail of the humans before it. From the writhing mass of tentacles, a low, guttural hum emanated, a sound so strange it seemed to vibrate in Elina's bones. Further down, a group of beings with sharp, chitinous mandibles stood in a tight cluster, their heads held rigid and angled forward. They communicated silently through sharp clicks and the sudden, powerful release of pheromones that caused the air to thicken. Elina felt her skin prickle as the subtle scent reached her, a reminder of the vast differences between her species and the one she now sought to ally with. The walls of the hall seemed to lean in, the alien eyes locked upon her, observing every movement. The metallic voice of the station's automated system reverberated across the chamber, echoing unnervingly through the silence. "The humans have arrived," it announced, its tone flat, detached, and yet somehow laced with a cold amusement. "Delegate species number 147. The words stung in Elina's ears. 147, that was the number assigned to humanity. In a galaxy of beings that had existed for millennia, humans were the latest arrivals, newborns in a room full of ancients. It was a thought that had been driven into her mind during months of preparation. Humans were not equals here. They were children, crawling into a room filled with the wise and the powerful. Despite the discomfort, Elina straightened her back and took another step forward. Her blue uniform shimmered under the station's artificial lights, its clean lines a stark contrast to the strange and organic forms of the delegates. She felt the weight of her title as humanity's first official envoy, but it was a burden she had trained for her entire life. Everything she did, every word she spoke, would determine the future of Earth's place in the galaxy. At the center of the Grand Hall stood Arch-Governor Gillick, a creature of such alien design that Elina felt a chill run through her. His gray skin was covered in intricate jeweled implants that glowed faintly in the dim light, the colors shifting like liquid metal. His eyes, 4 in total, each blinking independently, studied her with a gaze that made her feel small, insignificant. His voice, when he spoke, was like the grinding of stones. Even through the universal translator, his words were grating. "Welcome, Earth representative," he said, his tone cold, measuring. "The Council acknowledges your swift development." Elina forced herself to smile, her gaze unwavering despite the feeling of dread that clawed at her chest. "Earth thanks the Council for this opportunity," she said, her voice firm but respectful. "We come seeking friendship and knowledge." The air seemed to vibrate as a ripple of laughter, or what she hoped was laughter, passed through the delegates. It wasn't the warm, welcoming laughter of a community eager to embrace newcomers. It was the laughter of those who had seen it all, who had watched countless species rise and fall, and who now turned their eyes toward the fragile human presence with curiosity, but mostly with doubt. A voice, deep and resonant, issued from the tentacled delegate. "Yes," it said, its words dripping with condescension, "knowledge. Your species has much to learn about proper galactic behavior." Alina's smile didn't waver. She knew they saw humanity as a potential threat, a species that had rapidly advanced from radio signals to faster-than-light travel in a matter of mere centuries. In contrast, the oldest species here had been perfecting their civilizations for millions of years. Humanity was a child, yes, but Elina refused to let them see the fear that churned inside her. "We belong here," she told herself silently. "We have come to stay." And with that thought, she spoke again, louder, stronger this time, her voice carrying across the chamber, reaching the ancient ears of the Galactic Council. The chamber of the Galactic Council had felt almost welcoming during Elina's speech, with its cold metallic walls adorned with flickering holograms that danced in the air like ancient spirits. But now, as Elina and her team made their way to their quarters, the atmosphere in the station seemed to change. It was subtle at first, just a shift in the hum of the air, a slight flicker in the lights, but it was enough for Elina to sense the growing unease. The station's corridors, once bustling with the movement of alien delegates, were eerily silent now. The soft, rhythmic pulse of the station's artificial gravity felt off, as if the very air was heavier, pressing down with an invisible weight. As they moved through the winding halls, Elina caught sight of small, floating orbs hovering at the corners, their surfaces reflecting the soft blue glow of the station's lighting. They followed her, darting from wall to wall with uncanny precision, never blinking, never wavering. Their polished surfaces gave off a faint, eerie hum, like they were alive, monitoring every movement, every word. Miguel, her trusted assistant, moved beside her, his eyes flicking nervously from side to side. "Ma'am," he whispered, leaning close, "there's encrypted traffic between the council members. Activity is off the charts. Something's happening. I think they're..." Alina's stomach tightened. She could feel it, too. The shift in the station's pulse, the strange, almost imperceptible vibrations beneath her feet, it wasn't just her imagination. The council was afraid. She could sense their fear, their wariness. The rapid acceleration of their response was unlike anything she had anticipated. It wasn't the fear of Earth's weapons that unsettled them, it was humanity's potential. In just a few centuries, humanity had achieved what other species had taken millennia to even dream of. Their rapid ascent in technology and knowledge was both impressive and terrifying. Elina stood by the viewport in her quarters, gazing out at the dark expanse of space. Earth, just a tiny blue dot in the distance, appeared peaceful, unaware of the storm brewing in the void. The distant light of the stars flickered in the blackness, a comforting constant in an otherwise unpredictable universe. She hoped, prayed, that the fear within the Galactic Council would soon subside. That they would come to see humanity as an ally, not a threat.
But deep down, Elina knew it wasn't that simple. There was a darkness to the Council's reaction, a growing suspicion that humanity's rapid evolution couldn't be trusted. As she gazed out into space, a cold shiver ran down her spine. It wasn't just the fear of the unknown that troubled her, it was the knowledge that something darker was unfolding within the walls of the Council station. She could feel it, like a shadow creeping closer, slowly consuming the light. The quiet stillness of the night was broken by the soft, mechanical hum of her door sliding open. Elina's eyes shot open, her pulse quickening. The darkness of the room wrapped around her like a heavy cloak, the faintest flicker of starlight creeping through the viewport. The door hissed shut behind her as she sat up, her breath shallow. She was not alone. 6 tall, armored figures stood in the doorway, their movements precise and unnerving. The air in the room felt colder, the weight of their presence pressing in on her. Their armor was sleek, metallic, and black, reflecting no light, just like shadows brought to life. Their eyes, concealed behind dark visors, were impossibly still. They looked like predators, creatures designed for a singular purpose. Ambassador Ray, a voice echoed from the leader of the group, cold and mechanical. It was a voice devoid of emotion, like the screech of metal scraping against metal. "You will come with us." Her heart slammed in her chest as panic flared. "What is this about?" she demanded, her voice trembling despite her attempts at composure. One of the guards reached forward, grabbing her wrist with a grip that felt like iron. "The Council has called an emergency session. Your presence is required." Elina tried to pull away, but her efforts were futile. She was surrounded, her body pressed between the wall and the unyielding force of the guards. Her mind raced. What emergency? She had no idea what was happening, but the fear creeping into her bones told her this was not a simple meeting. Her communicator was useless, no signal. Earth was cut off from her, unable to help or even hear her voice. The corridors were quieter now, the sound of their boots echoing through the sterile hallways. The usual hustle and bustle of the station seemed to have quieted, leaving only the haunting echo of their footsteps. As they passed through the grand hall, Elina glanced up at the high, vaulted ceiling, her gaze falling on the ancient creatures of the Galactic Council who watched her with cold, indifferent eyes. But something was different. The air felt thicker, oppressive, as if a storm was about to break. The council members were gathered, their eyes locked on her as she was brought into the center of the chamber. The once imposing room now felt suffocating. The usual hum of voices was gone. The chatter, the murmurs of alien languages, all absent. The council was silent. No one spoke. There was an unspoken tension hanging in the air, and Elina could feel it. It was a silence that wasn't calm, it was heavy, suffocating. Something darker was at play. As the guards pushed her toward the center of the room, Elina caught sight of Arch-Governor Gillick, his jeweled implants glittering ominously in the dim light. His 4 eyes blinked slowly, his gaze never leaving her. He looked different. There was no welcoming smile this time. His presence was more imposing, more calculating. The tension in the room was palpable, and Elina felt her heart race. Something was wrong. This was not a regular session. It was not what she had been led to believe. She could feel the council's judgment bearing down on her, and she was no longer sure what fate awaited her. The whispers in the shadows grew louder, and Elina felt herself begin to tremble. The growing fear in the chamber was not just of humanity, it was of her. And whatever this emergency session was, she feared it was a moment she wouldn't be able to escape. The cold, metallic walls of the council chamber closed in around Elina, their oppressive weight a stark contrast to the lingering remnants of the grand hall where she had spoken only hours before. The grandeur of the room had dissolved, replaced by a somber, suffocating silence. The council members, once distant figures in the shadows, now loomed over her, their many eyes focused with unsettling precision. It was no longer a place of diplomacy but a court of judgment. Gillick's presence was more commanding than ever, his jeweled implants flashing as his 4 eyes narrowed in an almost predatory gaze. His voice echoed throughout the chamber, as harsh and unyielding as grinding stone. "You are a threat," Gillick's words cut through the silence, sharp as a blade. "You brought military secrets into this mission." The words hung in the air, thick with accusation.
Alina's heart skipped a beat, but she fought to maintain her composure, her eyes meeting Gillick's unblinking gaze. "This is absurd," Elina protested, her voice steady despite the tremor deep within.
"The communicator is standard procedure for all high-ranking diplomats. It's a direct link to Earth's leadership in case of an emergency, nothing more." She knew the words would not be enough. No one here would listen. The council had already made up its mind. A strange, oppressive feeling settled over her as she realized that her fate had already been sealed. A soft hum resonated through the chamber, and the air seemed to thicken. The lights dimmed, casting a shadowy glow over the massive hall as a holographic display flickered to life in the center of the room. It was a projection, vivid and unnervingly precise. The hologram showed Alina's quarters, zooming in on her personal belongings. The image focused on the small metal disc on her desk, her quantum communicator. It hovered in midair for a moment, glistening under the artificial light, before the hologram shifted to show a direct connection to Earth's military command. The projection pulsed with an eerie light, highlighting the connection, a lifeline, and yet a symbol of betrayal to those watching. The council members remained silent as the evidence flickered in front of them. The hologram depicted the exact signal path, showing the secure channel Elina had maintained with Earth's highest command. The connection was clear, undeniable. "Your diplomatic mission," Gillick's voice dripped with disdain, "was nothing more than a cover for espionage. This device, which bypasses all communication channels, proves your true intentions." Elina felt her stomach churn as the weight of their words bore down on her. The display was damning, and the council's minds had been made up long before she stepped foot in this chamber. She could see it in their eyes, the cold, calculating gaze of ancient beings who had seen entire species rise and fall. She tried again to defend herself. "This is a misunderstanding. The communicator is for emergencies, as was explained in the briefing." But her voice faltered in the face of their indifference. A sharp click echoed through the chamber, the sound of a vote being cast. Gillick's expression remained unreadable as he turned to face the council. "The evidence is irrefutable," he declared. "The council has spoken. The human threat must be contained before it spreads further." Alina's breath caught in her throat as the finality of his words struck her. There was no trial. No chance for defense. The decision had been made, and her fate was sealed in an instant. The council's eyes, once curious and skeptical, now held a cold resolve. She had become a pawn in a game she could not comprehend. Her voice trembled as she tried once more, "This isn't the way forward. Humanity has no intention of threatening anyone. We seek only peace." But before she could finish, the room erupted into motion. Guards, silent, towering figures in obsidian armor, moved swiftly, their hands gripping her arms, dragging her toward a glass chamber in the center of the room. The coldness of the glass felt like the touch of death itself as they forced her into the cylinder. The door sealed with a soft hiss, leaving her trapped inside. The air felt thin, suffocating, as the reality of her situation began to sink in. Gillick's voice rang out, final and merciless. "The punishment is severe. Purification by fire is the only fitting end for such a primitive species." The glass chamber began to hum with a low, mechanical sound, and Alina's heart raced. The floor beneath her feet began to warm, a faint heat creeping through the soles of her boots. She could see the faint red glow emanating from the chamber's base, a foreboding sign of the flames to come. The walls shimmered with an unnatural light, as though they were alive, drawing energy from some unseen source. Elina stood tall, trying to steady her breath, the heat growing more intense by the second. Her heart hammered in her chest, but she refused to show fear. Not here, not in front of them. She had come to this moment prepared to face whatever came her way, but this, the certainty of her death, was a fate she hadn't expected. Her thoughts turned to Earth, to the people she represented, and to the promise she had made to them. She couldn't allow them to think she had died in vain. If this was to be her end, it would be on her terms. As the flames began to rise around her, licking the edges of the glass chamber, Elina took a deep breath, steadying herself against the overwhelming heat. She closed her eyes for a moment, her thoughts turning inward. When she opened them again, her voice rang out, clear and unwavering, amplified by the chamber's speakers, carrying her final message to the farthest reaches of the galaxy. Earth is watching. Earth will remember.
The words echoed through the chamber, their resonance lingering even as the flames began to engulf her. The fire curled around her legs, climbing higher, hotter, until the air itself seemed to boil with intensity. But even as the heat consumed her, Elina's final words, her defiance, were broadcast far beyond the confines of the council's reach.
The flames rose higher, and Elina's figure slowly disappeared, swallowed by the inferno.
But her spirit, her message, would endure. The transmission was secure, and Earth, the home she had loved and defended, would not forget.
They would remember her. They would remember the truth.
As the chamber's lights flickered and the flames finally consumed the last of her physical form, a single message flashed across the galaxy, a promise, an unbroken oath.
Earth remembers.
In the depths of a secure command center, far below the surface of Earth, President Alvarez sat in her chair, her face a mask of stone. The room was dim, illuminated only by the cold, blue glow of holographic screens that hovered in front of her. These displays, usually reserved for routine matters, were now saturated with the harrowing footage of Elina Ray's execution. The flames had devoured her, turning her body into a charred memory, but it was the words she had left behind that burned into the hearts of those who watched.
Earth remembers.
The room was silent except for the soft clicking of keyboards and the distant hum of machinery.
The weight of the moment was tangible. This was no longer a political issue, it was personal.
The council had crossed a line, and the consequences would echo throughout the galaxy.
President Alvarez's fingers hovered over the communication console, her gaze unwavering as the footage continued to loop on the screen.
The room was filled with senior military officials, intelligence officers, and advisors, all standing in quiet attention, waiting for her command. The weight of leadership pressed down on her, but she had made up her mind the moment she saw the fire consume Elina's body. Her voice cut through the silence like a blade.
Odin Protocol, immediate implementation.
The words were simple, but they carried a cold finality. As she spoke, she could feel the gravity of her decision, one that would send humanity into a new, dark chapter of its history. Outside the command center, Earth fell into a deep, unsettling silence. For 3 days, not a single broadcast was made, not a single message transmitted into the void of space. Communications channels, both civilian and military, were cut off entirely. The Earth held its breath, as though the planet itself was mourning its fallen ambassador. The fury of humanity simmered just beneath the surface, barely contained, and the sense of unity, though brief, was palpable. Behind the silence, Earth's war machine began to awaken. The underground factories, long dormant and hidden beneath miles of rock, came to life with a buzz of energy. Conveyor belts hummed with activity, churning out sleek new ships designed for speed and precision. Workers, once tasked with building civilian vessels and cargo transports, now worked around the clock, constructing ships of war. Modular designs, ships that could be built quickly, without the need for extensive resources, began to take shape in the shadows of Earth's subterranean vaults. The air in these factories was thick with the smell of burning metal, oil, and the sharp scent of plasma cutters. The smell of war. The speed with which the ships were constructed was almost unnatural. The sleek, predatory designs of these vessels were nothing like the clunky, outdated ships humanity had once relied on. These new crafts seemed alive, a reflection of humanity's desperation and the need for retribution. Each ship was a statement, a promise that Earth would not be crushed under the boot of the Council. Earth would not be forgotten. 3 months after the execution, the Galactic Council fleet, under the command of Admiral Plex, began its journey toward Earth. The fleet moved with grim determination, convinced that this would be the end of humanity's defiance. Their path was clear: Earth, a vulnerable world still reeling from the loss of its ambassador, would be an easy target. After all, the humans were a young species, their weapons primitive compared to the Council's vast technological superiority. What could a few small, insignificant ships do against the might of the Council's war fleet? As Admiral Plex's fleet neared Earth, the sensors aboard the Council's ships began to detect something strange. Small, sleek human vessels, far smaller than anything they had expected, appeared suddenly in their path. These ships were unlike anything the Council had encountered. They had no visible engines, no discernible weapon ports, just sleek, organic lines that seemed to bend and fold around themselves. At first, it was hard to determine their exact shape, as if the ships themselves were shifting between dimensions.
The Council fleet had never seen anything like it. "What is this?" Admiral Klex's voice crackled through the command deck.
He leaned forward, his eyes narrowing in disbelief.
"We've faced primitive humans before. This is nothing." But the reality was far worse than Klex could have imagined.
The human ships weren't just small, they were agile. Too agile. As the fleet advanced, the human vessels seemed to fold space around themselves, their movements impossibly fast. They appeared in new positions with each blink of the eye, outmaneuvering the Council ships at every turn. The Council's targeting systems, which had been honed over centuries, struggled to lock onto their targets. The weapons fired from the human ships defied logic. Energy beams that should have been devastating simply bent around the Council's ships as though they were repelled by an invisible force. A wave of confusion spread through the fleet, the reality of their miscalculation dawning on them. The human ships were doing something that shouldn't have been possible. The beams from their weapons didn't leave any detectable energy signature, making them almost impossible to track. It was as if the very laws of physics were being twisted. One of the Council's largest battlecruisers, the Indomitable, was the first to fall. As it moved into position to strike, its hull suddenly buckled, torn open like paper. There was no explosion, just a deep, resonating crack, followed by the instant decompression of the ship's atmosphere. The crew had no time to react. The ship began to disintegrate from the inside out, torn apart by forces that were as alien to the Council as the human ships themselves. We can't track them," shouted one of the sensors officers. "They're warping space, bending it. The energy signatures aren't registering." The Council fleet was in chaos. Ships that once seemed invincible now scattered in a disorganized retreat. There was no coordinated attack, no disciplined strategy, just panic as the human vessels struck without mercy. The attack was swift, calculated, and devastating. As Admiral Klex watched the destruction unfold, his heart pounded in his chest. His fleet was crumbling. The pride of the Galactic Council, its military might, was being dismantled in minutes. The words of the ancient council members, who had once underestimated humanity, now echoed in his mind. They had feared humanity's potential. And now, they were paying the price for that fear. "What is happening?" Klex whispered to himself, as the battlefield seemed to twist into a surreal nightmare. "What kind of species are these humans?" The battle unfolded like a storm of fire and energy, a chaotic symphony of destruction. The once mighty fleet of the Galactic Council, towering, invulnerable ships, had been reduced to nothing more than floating debris within the span of 20 minutes. The speed with which it happened left even the most seasoned officers stunned. The humans, it seemed, didn't need to chase. Their ships moved with such terrifying precision that they struck when and where it hurt the most, their weapons tearing through the hulls of the Council's battlecruisers with unnatural force. There was no pursuit. There was no need. The Council's fleet was already in pieces, shattered like glass across the emptiness of space. Admiral Klex stood on the bridge of his flagship, his eyes wide with disbelief. His crew scrambled around him, their voices rising in frantic reports that only worsened his sense of doom. The once proud vessels of the Council were now twisted wrecks, drifting aimlessly in space, their engines silent and useless. The vast array of weapons that had once been so powerful now lay silent, useless against the humans' strange and brutal methods. "They've become more than we ever feared," Klex muttered, his voice hollow. He couldn't comprehend what had just happened. How had they, the most advanced civilization in the galaxy, been so thoroughly outmatched by a species they had considered infants only months before? "We've underestimated them." A pulse of energy flashed across space, and the battle ceased as quickly as it had begun. There was no pursuit. The humans didn't need to continue their assault. The message had been made clear, and it echoed through the silent remains of the battlefield. Earth remembers. Across the galaxy, far from the battlefields, military outposts stationed throughout Council space began to fall. They were taken out with surgical precision, no civilians harmed, no collateral damage. The targets were military bases, weapons depots, and strongholds, the very infrastructure that had kept the Council's dominance intact for millennia. Each destruction sent a message to the Council: Earth was no longer a fragile, helpless species. It had learned. It had adapted. And now, it was taking control of its own destiny. The fall of the Galactic Council. The cracks within the Galactic Council began to show almost immediately. As the reality of the war's outcome spread through the galaxy, old alliances started to fracture. Species that had once been subjugated, manipulated, or ignored by the Council began to rise up. The truth, long hidden, was exposed for all to see. The Council had manipulated countless civilizations, keeping them weak and dependent. The galaxy's younger species had been nothing more than pawns in the Council's endless game of control. It was in the midst of this chaos that the trial began. The leaders who had been responsible for the brutal treatment of humanity, including Arch-Governor Gillick, were brought before Earth's representatives. Their arrogance had led them to believe they could silence humanity with a single execution. Now, they were forced to face the consequences of their actions. President Alvarez, standing at the podium, addressed the accused with a voice that was steady, unwavering, and filled with a quiet power. "We stand for justice," she said, her eyes locking onto Gillick, "not vengeance." The words were not for the Council's ears alone. They were a promise to the galaxy, a promise that humanity, in its pursuit of justice, would not descend into the same cycle of violence and corruption that the Council had built its power upon. The trial was not about retribution. It was about exposing the truth. The new Galactic Federation. In the aftermath of the war, Earth set its sights on a new future, one built on cooperation, mutual defense, and the protection of all species. The remnants of the Galactic Council's old guard were dismantled. Their lies, their manipulations, their rule, they were swept away in the face of a new era. The birth of the new Galactic Federation was not without its challenges, but it marked the dawn of something far more profound than conquest. Earth had led the charge, but it was no longer about dominance. It was about mutual respect. About ensuring that the mistakes of the past were never repeated. Admiral Maya Chen, now at the helm of the Federation's new fleet, addressed the first official meeting of the Federation's military commanders. "We've built a Federation on cooperation and mutual defense," she said, her voice resonating with authority and purpose. "We will protect those who cannot protect themselves." Humanity had become a beacon of hope, not through destruction, but through the power of protection. They had faced down the greatest power in the galaxy and emerged victorious. But instead of standing in the ashes of their enemies, they stood in the ashes of their own past, ready to build something better. A new dawn for the galaxy. A year passed. The wounds of war had not yet fully healed, but the galaxy was changing. The Federation's fleet, once a symbol of human desperation, now stood as a testament to their commitment to peace. The ships, sleek and powerful, moved across the stars, safeguarding young civilizations and ensuring that the lessons learned in the dark days of war would never be forgotten. President Alvarez stood on the balcony of her office, looking out at the sprawling city below. It was a new world, a world where the scars of the past were beginning to fade, replaced by the hope of the future. Her voice, when it came, was calm but resolute. "Today, we choose what kind of power we will be in the galaxy. Not destroyers, but protectors." The Federation had not been built on vengeance. It had been built on hope. And under humanity's leadership, the galaxy would find its way to peace, one step at a time. The final pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, and humanity's legacy was being written across the stars. This was only the beginning. The galaxy was vast, but it was no longer a place of oppression and fear. It was a place where Earth, once a solitary and isolated planet, stood at the forefront of a new era. And in the silence of space, the stars glowed just a little brighter. Thank you for joining us on today's adventure in the universe. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to HFY Sci-Fi Love and War Story. We have plenty more thrilling tales, full of love, war, and the mysteries of extraterrestrial encounters, waiting for you. We want to hear your thoughts and ideas, so leave your comments below and share your favorite moments. What did you think of humanity's rise in the face of adversity? What kind of future do you think we'll create in the stars? Let's continue the conversation, together. Until next time, keep exploring, keep dreaming, and remember Earth remembers.